rocher de va, Bhaile, rocher de va, Bhaile, rocher de va, Bhaile.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Monday Mailbox. This week we got Fiend. You all know him, you'll love him, and we're going to answer all your questions you have for us today.
Thanks for having me, Guard. I appreciate it.
I love you.
Oh my god.
So, first question comes in. What led you to maining Highlander? Would you say that the journey to Rep 70 and having him be your image was worth it? Fiend, you want to take this one?
Yeah, that's it's a really good question. For me, I was interested in Highlander from the moment I saw the pre-launch trailer. I had personally been hoping, and kind of still am, but not really, for a knight with a greatsword. I had wanted that so much. That's what I had imagined my ultimate main being, and Highlander was very, very close, and so I was happy to jump on that bandwagon immediately. And from there, I was still in the Knights faction, but I very much adopted myself into the Viking mindset pretty fully, and yeah, I do think it was worth it. I mean, the only regret I may have is honestly playing one hero so much. Although I do love Highlander, I tend to notice that I'm a little bit weaker in fighting other heroes sometimes because I'm not in that mindset because I don't play enough other heroes. But outside of that, I mean, if you were going to pick one hero to main, the skill depth and technical depth of Highlander makes it really, really worth it because you are continuing to grow well past the point you hit Rep 70. I'm still learning every day, and I still learn things from other higher up Highlanders that I meet, so absolutely.
I mean, yeah, that's super fair. I have a vastly different answer than you.
I'm excited to hear what it is.
Oh, it's great. I know all of the people who think I love Highlander are waiting to hear this. I do love the hero. I really do. I love his aesthetic and all that. And I love the general concept of how he plays. When he came out, the trailer was super cool, but I was so not into it. Because I was like, the Highlander, he's going to have like this weird claymore sword, but claymores aren't two-handed swords in real life. They're just long swords with big handles, which does not equal.
Right.
But nope, they had it, and it was very much like exactly what you think a Highlander would look like in a video game. Like, whatever. But, and I was like, I should try him, and I picked him up, and I was like, fuck, it sucks. Because Highlander was awful when he released. He did, like, awful damage, he used a lot of stamina.
Yeah, probably, just factually the worst on the roster. We're pretty damn close. Yeah, it was a real struggle bus.
But then it hit, it started kind of clicking, what a crushing Counter-Strike was, because this is still kind of early on in the game life, and how offensive works, and it was like, oh, I get it now. It's all kind of mix-up based, and his damage is pretty cool, and that's when it started clicking, and I went from Lawbringer to him, and that was cool.
Yeah.
And
so for you, it was always more about the gameplay than the aesthetic, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't like the aesthetic, but it grew on me. And then once I got into the higher tiers, where he didn't look like, he didn't look kind of like a homeless Skalagrim. I
like that. Yeah, a little beefier maybe, but
yeah, he's a little chunky. But the higher tiers have such cool aesthetics to them, and that kind of grew on me. And,
definitely.
But during Rep 70. That was a rough one because I stopped maining him halfway through and mained Shaolin for 30, 40 reps and went back to him. So
yeah, I had forgotten about that.
During Rep 70, rough, doable. I would do it again. If we had a hard reset, I would do the exact same thing. Nice. Having him as the image, I really love my logo, of course, but as the Highlander look, yeah, I think it's unique enough, and I really wouldn't change the image of it. I wouldn't change my image on any sort of streaming service or content creation. I really like the Highlander look for that.
I can definitely understand where you're coming from with that one, yeah. It doesn't surprise me too much that you feel that way. I know it may surprise some of your other viewers, but I know you to be a pretty realistic boy, and I know that some of the some of the more egregious breaks in that in For Honor
All about the
can be a little bit much. Yeah, I feel that for sure.
Oh, I bet. Next question comes in. Guard, if you're in control of creating the Highlander hero, would there be any way you would change how he looks, plays, aspect-wise, or aesthetically the hero itself, since you have made him for a long time and up to the max of 70 reps? I think we can both take this, but you are more than welcome to go first.
All right. Yeah, that's actually a really good question, too. When we sort of talked about some of those things, I mean, if I were in ultimate control, right, Highlander would have been a knight, and he would have had, a freaking massive Biden-hander ripping through, crowds of minions, and things would be... But as far as, without going too far out of the box, when it comes to specifically Highlander is as Highlander is now, some things that could maybe happen later in the game, right? I would love to see a little bit more metal on my boy. I want a little bit more mail. I would love, a mail hauberk or something to protect my guy. You can kind of make a full helm out of, the Milozan helm and the antler ornament, but outside of that, you really can't. So more options that have a, covered face, full helm type option. And then, really, I do think that a lot of the content creators, actually, Guard in particular, do a really good job of having realistic-looking Highlanders, and that's popular in Highlander. But I feel like he could still use more options that make that easier and kind of line up on the realistic spectrum.
Oh my god, yeah. There's so many cool things. Great swords existed around at the very end of the 15th century, going into the 16th and 17th century. So very, very late in the Renaissance. And around that time, you also have the Galaglass, which are the Celtic mercenaries, which are kind of the inspiration for Highlander. And they look awesome. They've got cloaks and armor, not unlike Lawbringer. Mail, they look good. They've got these all sorts of crazy helmets. Their swords look really unique. To be fair, the sword in the game isn't that bad. There's a lot of cool looks you can do, a lot of realistic looks from based on Celtic swords at the time.
Yeah, the armor's where it falls apart.
No, armor's really where it falls apart. Especially since kilts didn't come around until the 17th century, which is past the date of most of the For Honor stuff. But it is a game, and I concede that, and it's a fantasy world that isn't in our context. And however, this is the part I've been waiting all week for. Highlander does not use a greatsword like a greatsword was used. He just doesn't. There is no sword style out there that looks like Highlander. It's not based in history in any way. The guards he uses aren't from greatsword fencing. It's not from any of the rules you find in Montante fencing with Spanish greatsword. And that would be cool if we had that. It's so flashy and big with big arcing movements, and oh man, I'll probably put in a GIF into this so you guys can see a little bit of it. But it's so cool and so awesome and pretty easy to replicate, and they just didn't. I'm not sure if they didn't know, if they didn't have the resources. But it's unfortunate because he wields it around like it's not a great sword.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that one. For Honor's just sort of in an odd spot with that, which in some ways I love, right? I love that it's, a mash between fantasy and history, and it in some ways falls pretty far in fantasy where I might have, when the game was first releasing, right, I did expect it to be more historically accurate.
Right.
And that was sort of a misconception on my part going in. I probably should have known earlier. But kind of like Guard, I've been very into, especially the, European history and about weapons and armor. I've always enjoyed those things, and so I agree that I would have liked some of those changes. But admittedly, a lot of other heroes in For Honor are just as historically warped from anything that they really could be compared to. Another good example is someone like Shinobi.
Oh, absolutely. They just, it's in the same year. They just kind of, they took some liberties with it because the Kusarigama isn't actually like that. It's not used like that. It's not the same weapon.
Not at all.
Not even the same.
Nor was the concept of a Shinobi pretty dang different.
Yeah, it was a little bit. I think it
But,
looks like he
yeah,
looked more
no,
like
that-
Aramusha, right? IRL just looks like a dude.
Well, hell yeah, more just like a dude. That's more or less it. I mean, spy more than a fighter,
Right.
for sure. In 99% of circumstances. But that doesn't really work super well in a fighting video game. So I definitely understand that you got to take liberties.
Yeah, for
and I
marketing
do
and
enjoy
whatnot.
the fantasy side. I mean, if For Honor was straight historical, I mean, it's possible I would still just love it. And I think I would still just love it. But I definitely, like, as a person, right, in my channel, The Fiend of Ondar, the kinds of games that I enjoy and cover, like, yes, it definitely, anything that's got guys in armor with sharp weapons, like, I'm all about it, and I'm gonna be there. But my, like, true home lies pretty much right in this gap between fantasy and history, and I do like that For Honor makes a pretty genuine effort to tickle both.
They
if
do.
you know what I
They
mean.
really do. There's a lot of history that they did do research on. I can point out Lawbringer because it's the one I remember the best. Lawbringer's armor is based on Spanish armor at the time. The helm, the Deneb helm, his basic helmet, is a real helmet, a real armet that is in a museum, and they
I
just
didn't know
copy
that.
and pasted.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool. I'll see if I can find a picture and post it up while this is running.
Yeah, that's good to know. I actually hadn't realized that. As far as things that you could change about how Highlander plays, and I guess I'll talk less on a visual level, because I would agree with most of what Guard said visually. But on a gameplay level, I have always kind of wanted, frankly, what the Testing Grounds is bringing, and I guess that's kind of a bad answer because it encompasses everybody in the game, but one of the biggest complaints and reasons why you do get Salt as a Highlander and why people don't always like playing against you is because of how high damage your 50/50s are.
Oh my god.
And having mix-ups that are not as high damage, and somebody can eat 5 or 6 of them, but you still do more damage than, the average, assassin. Because that's still necessary if his attacks are going to be the speed that they are. But lowering the damage of that and making it a more interactive experience for people where they can make more than one, or at that point, perfect. And we are going to be getting that. But I honestly think that's been one of Highlander's biggest problems, because he is really fun to play, and as far as the way it feels to play him, I genuinely don't want very many changes. But making it easier to play against a Highlander, not in terms of how easily you can escape the mix-ups and yada, those things need to be addressed to a certain extent. But the damage of them and how, people can be encouraged to fight against you in the first place and not dodge roll everything that you do.
It's true. No, you're not wrong. Next question comes in. Guard, I heard you mention your ideas for Highlander changes previously, though you can't find them. That's alright, I'll put the link in the description. I'd be interested to know if Fiend is in agreement, or if he has any different ideas. Fiend, do you know my stances on my ideas for Highlander right now?
Not entirely.
Okay.
I might need a refresher.
I did a video about it, but it's kind of outdated. The ideas are the same. I want them to reduce his offensive damage.
Sure.
It's just too high. It's too polarizing. I want them to get rid of the whole wave dashing thing.
Sure.
I'm a Highlander main. I don't like wave dashing. It's very limiting if you don't have it undodgeable. It makes almost some heroes unplayable if they're fighting against you. And it's just a frustrating mechanic, and it leads to buggy situations like there's a couple things right now, like was it wave switching? There's some weird interaction you do coming out of it, but it just leads to problems. But on the flip side, I'll also love some changes to Celtic Curse. I don't think it needs to be undodgeable because that's not the problem I have with it. The problem is that it's super reactable. It's an attack that you have to commit to if you don't go into offensive mode, and that's a problem if you're fighting people like Aramusha, Conqueror, Warlord, Blackbriar, any of these heroes. That's just a problem. Not to mention, you can't just dodge attack it safely and have no quarrels or anything by most heroes. So that has some problems. I'd really just like to be able to feint it, just a hard feint of it. If you got to reduce the damage of it, do it. It's just a normal attack. It's not unblockable. It's a completely reactable mix-up, even when delayed. So if you just give me the option to hard feint it, cool. That's a nice, easy thing. I would like my defensive lights to not be 600 MS so I could use them to do stuff. I would like my side heavies to not be 1000 MS and have hyper armor at 800 MS. Top one doesn't matter, that's a different thing. But I want my side heavies to be worth a damn. And I want my zone to be usable. I would love a zone that
Yeah,
works.
yeah, those are all good points.
But definitely bring down the offensive damage if you're going to make the other changes, because right now Highlander kind of exists in his own tier list. He doesn't really follow. He doesn't follow the rules of physics as far as tier lists go. But I don't know. What do you think of those changes?
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of good points. I do naturally disagree about a couple things.
Oh, of course.
But not most. I would say that let me address this first. There's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding about how good Highlander really is, and that comes from a couple of things.
Oh,
One, yeah. Highlander has more rampant tech than, I think, to my knowledge, any other hero in the game.
Yeah, even the most complicated heroes like Shaolin do not have the kind of tech the Highlander has.
Anywhere near. Right, so the thing is, if you're a normal Highlander player, say you use no tech, Highlander is in a very different tier than, especially, say, 6 months or a year ago, right? We're not even talking about right now.
Yeah.
6 months or a year ago, Highlander was pretty doable in Grandmaster, and not that there aren't people who are still doing it now, but due to a couple pieces of ridiculously powerful tech, like the option select, the offensive option select pairing,
that was pretty broken,
is the most famous example, right?
Right.
Not a whole lot of Highlanders knew about it. Even a lot of Rep 70 Highlanders didn't know about it. But there were a good number of people who did, and those people often, but not always, used that to great effect. And there was a huge polarization in how good people think Highlander really is, because some people can't be touched because they use very powerful basis, and then there are other people who are playing the hero the way he was intended, and he is drastically underpowered, right? And then you fast forward a couple of months, now the offensive option select has been nerfed. It's not very useful anymore, but it did have some other consequences on Highlander's gameplay, which is kind of where that wave switch that you were talking about comes in.
Yeah.
But in general, see with Highlander, say if he were not to get a rework, is that people are still discovering tech.
It's still coming out.
It's not like that's over, right? There are things that I don't know about that have been discovered relatively recently. There will be things that keep coming out, I'm pretty sure, as time goes on. And that's just a result of all this going on behind the scenes with Highlander, right? And I don't think that in Highlander's state right now, that he has too much tech that is too useful to most people that make him very powerful. Let's talk about wave dashing, right?
Right.
Wave dashing, in a way, it's got some complications for regular, like if you're throwing neutral attacks, per se, right? Anything but a guard break. Highlander can punish guard breaks pretty hard with a kick and with a light. So it puts you in a really rough situation. I think the most useful thing about wave dashing is that it is sort of an option select for level 1, level 3 bashes. So you want to take Sense level 1 punch, level 3 knockdown. Warden's level 1 shoulder bash, level 3 shoulder bash. And same with Highlander's kick grab, right? You can wave dash and the grab. It is essentially a dodge option select. How do you beat that? You beat it with either an undodgeable or with a guard break. Are there characters who can't do that? Yes. But I think that is more the problem of those characters, and that we need to buff most of our heroes up to the top tier rather than nerfing everybody back down.
Right.
That's just my opinion. I haven't seen too much craziness come as a result of dashing, but that's just me. But other than that, that's the one thing I would be pretty sad to lose, right? The only piece of tech. Everything else, be it the flicker I want, but a lot of characters have flicker.
A lot of characters have
That's
flicker.
not a Highlander exclusive problem, but Highlander has bad flicker on his heavies that can be done, right? There are problems with his offensive emote that needs to get looked at, because you can use it to flicker all kinds of stuff. You can use it to flicker kicks and grabs. Pretty hard to do. It's pretty inconvenient in the middle of a match, and that's why it doesn't get used more. But there are a lot of rampant problems in those ways. But second to that, in terms of changes to his main kit, right? I mentioned this earlier, but I absolutely agree with Guard on the damage. His offensive damage is just too high. It's not fun. I find myself getting annoyed. I mean, and Highlander mirrors are my favorite kind of match, and I've spent a lot of time making
They're my
sure
least favorite.
that I love them, man. And that might be because I just made a 5-hour video of them, but I really like them. But there is an annoyance factor for sure when you guess wrong twice, and when you're playing the game in a certain way, right? Like, I don't typically dodge roll. I will if I'm sweating my ass off. If I'm in ranked and we're competing for a Grandmaster slot, I am going to dodge roll you. But other than that, if I'm playing with my friends, I normally don't, because I know it's a problem for Highlander and it's just not that fun. So in those kinds of situations, being able to really participate in his mix-ups without option selecting out of it with something like a dodge roll, right? Or a really, really quick light in some circumstances, right? It's really, it really kind of forces you, okay, am I going to roll out or am I going to really play in this mix-up? And it's not very fun. It's very incentivizing not to, because it's just so scary if you make the wrong read once. But Guard, I'd be interested to hear if you think that the testing ground changes to his damage are going to be enough to facilitate that on their own, or if you think that on a percentage basis that Highlander's offensive damage needs to be reduced even more.
Damage-wise, I didn't see a huge issue. As kind of like we mentioned earlier in a different question, didn't really change. You just did more mix-ups, and you could because you had stamina.
Yeah, well, in that, man.
You just ended up doing
changes.
more
I mean,
things.
that's one, absolutely.
And,
yeah.
you know, the fact that they did, like, what was it, like 28, something like that, in testing rounds?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so bothersome at that point to get caught in a couple of kick grabs, you know, or to be expecting kick grabs and just eat a couple of kicks.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel so terrible at that point. Sure, it's still going to be a higher damage percentage than other heroes, and in a lot of ways, I think that's fair for at least the current downsides that you have while being an offensive.
All right, and with that, that'll wrap up our Monday mailbox questions this week. Thank you, Fiend, for joining me. Always love having you, and you're always welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Guard. I appreciate it. Love you, man.
Love you too. So, if you have any questions that you want in Monday mailbox, feel free to put them in the comments below. If you're in my Discord, it'll be in the Monday mailbox channel. And much love. Guard out. Hey everyone, thank you for watching. I invite you to join my Discord, links in the description. If you want to help support the channel, donation and Patreon links are down below. Much love, Guard out.